Today we're gonna make a whiskey old-fashioned mead. Okay, disclaimer, this is a fortified mead, so if you have a problem with fortified mead, just walk away.
Now, I just want to say out there that you are aware that one of the perhaps most popular commercially made meads is fortified.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Okay, so...
Anywho.
Yeah, and fortification just means we're going to be adding spirits to it. In this case, whiskey, because it's a whiskey old-fashioned mead. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour off some of our water because we're going to hydrate our yeast. We've started doing that recently because we've had a few bad batches. And hey, you know...
we had a bad experience.
Better safe than sorry. Speaking of yeast, we're going to be using the Beast 71B. Why are we using the Beast 71B?
Well, because we wanted to have a good performer, something that we could trust, and we also wanted our ABV initially to be kind of on the lower side, so that way we wouldn't have to add a ridiculous amount of whiskey to fortify in the end.
Also, 71B tends to bring out the fruitier flavors, so I'm really hoping it brings out some of the orange and the other fruity flavors that are going to be added later on. Today, this is a multi-part, it's one video, it's a multi-stage mead building experience though. So the first stage is we're going to add the basics to make the mead. Like I have here an orange, which off camera I called a lemon. And Derica asked me 3 times what was in my hand, and I said it's an orange, but I'm going to call it a lemon anyway. I don't know why I do that, but I do it all the time. It's funny because I don't call lemons oranges.
No.
Everything's a lemon. I don't know why. But I am using a zester because people have given me such a hard time when I take the peel off and there's a little bit of white. So, you know, I'm going to zest it. I'm zesting it. We're zesting. And I'm going to zest the whole stinking lemon. See, I just did it. That was not intentional. I'm going to zest the whole orange. You can see the comment section now. I don't know why I do it. It's just a thing. We have used mandarins a lot. Whoa, it's squirting all over the place.
It's
we have used mandarins a lot for their peels, and we found out that they have a very bitter components to the skin. So we don't want to use that. We're going to use an actual orange. I don't think it's a Florida orange, though. I think it's a California orange.
There's this weird thing that happens is that all the California oranges come to Florida and all the Florida oranges go to California.
Because they make more money.
It's just ridiculous.
This is going to take me a while. I don't really think you want to watch me do this.
No. We'll see you later.
Yeah. All right, so it's kind of a sloppy zest job, but you know, it's zested. It's good enough. It's what we needed. It's quite a bit of zest. I mean, you know, because you got to think about it. In an old-fashioned, if you don't know what an old-fashioned is, let me go through it. It's whiskey with ice, usually with a simple syrup or like something to sweeten it. Simple syrup is just sugar and water. It could be a sugar cube. Some people muddle a sugar cube into it. There's usually maraschino cherries and a swath of lemon peel. Now, I'm not doing the lemon peel for the aforementioned reasons.
Lemon or orange?
Orange. I swear I don't do it on purpose. There's a swath of orange peel in it. I'm going to do this the whole video, too, just so you're aware. Anytime I say lemon, I mean orange.
Orange.
Super simple. Don't know why. It's just a mental thing. So I have quite a bit of the zest in here. I'm just going to call it zest. Quite a bit of the zest in here. It's going to add a really nice orangey flavor that should permeate the entire brew. And that's what we want, because an old-fashioned does have kind of an orangey flavor to it, even though it's not overly orange. It's just a little orange.
But because he's zested, you know what he needs to do now, right?
I got to wash my hands. They're all sticky. Stuff went flying everywhere. I'll be right back. Okay, I noticed our yeast was floating, so I'm using the wuss, which is the whisk of unusually small size, to mix it up into the water. It should froth. If it doesn't froth, it's dead. What?
Froth?
Froth.
Foam? Froth.
You should see a foam dome. All right, so I'll just put that right there and we can all just sit and watch it. I'm kidding. All right, so what's next?
3 pounds of honey.
All right.
So today's honey of choice is wildflower honey. Why? Because we can find some at Costco, and it wasn't stupid expensive like all the other honeys that we can find right now are.
And this is going to be such a highly flavored mead that I think any nuance or subtlety from some of the more exotic honeys would be totally lost. So when you're making things like this, you don't have to use the super expensive stuff. Make sure you are using real honey, though. That's the trick. We have to look into, people have asked us to do a video on how do we know real honey from fake honey. And that's a really good question. And the problem is I don't want to call a company out incorrectly.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful on how we would be determining that and make sure that everything we're saying is 100% accurate, because I don't really want to get sued. You know, just a thing. I don't want to get sued. So we might have to work with generalities rather than an actual company, because some people have said, can you tell me what is real honey and what's not, like what companies are? I don't know that we can do that, but we might be able to find some guidelines or tips to tell you what is a real honey from a fake honey, maybe, possibly. But 3 pounds, I'm weighing it. It's very, very important to weigh things. That way you can be precise. By the way, we are using a little big mouth bubbler that you get from Northern Brewer when they have them in stock. As of a few days ago, I heard they had some in stock. They may not anymore. This is a 1.4 gallon fermenter, but we are actually making a batch that would fit in a 1 gallon fermenter. I just actually like to start off in the bigger container, wide open and everything. It's easier for me. By the way, I fixed our scale. It doesn't shut off now. So we can take all day pouring the honey and not have to worry about it. It used to actually time out, and it would time out at the worst possible time. Like I'd be watching it, and then there'd be something over there, you know, squirrel. And I'd turn away and now where was it, you know? But anyway, that doesn't happen anymore.
Okay, so we got our 3 pounds of honey done. So we don't need our scale anymore.
Right. Space, the final frontier. We never seem to have enough of it. Next, I want to start mixing some of this up, so I'm going to need our paddle.
This paddle and everything else we're using for this fermentation process has been sanitized in the Red Bucket Station.
Yeah, if you thought I was going to do it, not quite. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to dump in a good amount of the water. I don't want to do all of it yet, just because I don't want to splash it out of the container. Yes, if your water is heated or your honey is heated a little bit, it does help. Don't go past, say, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius right here, or you could actually harm your yeast when you get to that point. This was not heated, so it's, you know, room temperature, which is, our room temperature is like mid-70s for Fahrenheit. The Celsius would be right here. If you're wondering why I'm doing that, it's because of, you know, we have an international audience and a lot of people have been asking, and I've been lax in my duties in making those conversions.
And that's a reminder to himself when he's editing to make sure that he posts that.
Yep. Now, it's totally okay to be a little sloshy with it, as long as you don't get this everywhere. That's why I didn't want to fill it too much, because I do want some oxygen in this now. Because why? Why do I want oxygen in here?
Oxygen is really important at the beginning of fermentation because those yeasts need that oxygen in order to build their colony. The first part they're going to do once you add them to your must is they're going to be fruitful and multiply. Now, it's not the funky dance of love like I misspokenly said before.
To say that.
Because they just go bloop, 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 and divide and conquer. So once they are a happy group of little yeasty beasties, then they're going to get to munching down on those fermentable sugars and creating CO2 and alcohol. At that point, you don't want to have oxygen added because oxygen plus alcohol and acetobacter equals vinegar.
Now, acetobacters are always there. They're automatically in there, kind of like wild yeast. Well, just splashed. They're always present, but continue.
That was it.
Oh.
That was the end of the story.
Yeah, the alcohol and oxygen can activate the acetobacters. Yeah.
So, in summary, oxygen at the beginning, good. Oxygen after alcohol has been created, bad.
You want to make sure you mix it up real good, otherwise you won't get an accurate reading. But the yeast will still get to it, as we did our step feed dump mead. We just dumped it in, didn't even mix anything up, and it worked.
Yeah.
And it was actually really good.
It was.
The orange smell on this is already amazing. Like, I can totally this is coming out very orangey. I can't tell.
Well, you're going to have to add more water.
I know, but I won't be able to look at the bottom once I do that.
This is true.
Okay, so I'm just going to add the rest of our water. Grand total 100 ounces, 96 ounces, whatever you want to say, 3/4 of a gallon. Because 3 pounds of honey takes up roughly a quart, or 1/4 of our gallon. By the way, we're using US gallons, which are 3.75 liters, for those of you curious. Didn't have to do the conversion here for that one. The next thing I want to add is yeast nutrient. And why do I want to add yeast nutrient? Well,
because honey alone doesn't have everything a growing yeastie needs to be happy and fruitful. So we're going to give it some extra nutrients, primarily nitrogen, that the yeast can munch on. Now, not all nitrogen is created equal, and that's why we have changed our practices to add Fermate O. Fermate O, the O stands for organic, and that is our preferred nutrient of choice, and that's the one we're basically only going to use.
right. Now, there's a lot of different theories on how to add it. You can do staggered additions, where you add one at, a little bit at the beginning, then a couple days in, then a couple more days in. Well, I just like to front load and put it all in at once. We have recently switched over to using a lot more. Now, if you are using something other than Fermate O, I don't recommend what we're doing, because you could be adding more than the yeast need of other things that are not in Fermate O that could cause weird flavors, or it's just not going to be good.
If you want to learn more about that, do a quick Google foo on the internet, and there's many of the manufacturers that create these other nutrients that are going to tell you why it's important not to add too much.
However, we're going to use 10 grams of Fermate O and a little bit of water, and I just mixed it up using the whisk and dumped that in. If it's a little bit chunky, it's okay. Ours is like rock hard, and I have to, I need like an ice pick and a chisel to get it off of there. But it's fine. It still works. It's a couple years old, and it works great. But it does dissolve eventually. I just like to put it in a little bit of water to help it along. By the way, do not think you can put your yeast right into that same bowl, because you would, well, you can kill them. Yeah, you'd be over-nutrienting, adding too much nutrients for the yeast to be able to handle, and they won't like it, and they could die. So that's important. Speaking of dead, oh no, I'm seeing a little bit of foam.
A little bit of foam.
Yeah, it's not the most active 71B, but we know that these packets were purchased at a local homebrew shop. Oh, I'm seeing, yeah, there's foamy in there.
Yeah,
it's foamy.
It's doing its thing.
Yeah, it just needs more time, and it was coldish water, so yeah.
Now, if you are a longtime viewer and you've seen some of our ancient videos, you will notice that we did this nearly all the time.
Yep.
We didn't know why, to be honest. We just did it because
I knew that it told you if the yeast was alive.
that was a thing that you're supposed to do. And then we stopped doing it because it just seemed like an unnecessary step. And in fact, many of the manufacturers said it was an unnecessary step. Then we had this summer, which was really hot all over the world. And so when we got some of our yeast via mail during the hottest summer ever, we found out they weren't working too well. We think they died in postage. So now we're back to rehydrating our yeast just to make sure they're viable before adding them to our brew and wondering what the heck is going on.
Plus, it's just good entertainment. Anyway, so I'm going to take our yeast and just pour this in. Want to get it all, or as much as you can.
You still got the wuss. Can wuss it out.
I have the wuss. I can wuss it out, like she said. That just sounds all kinds of wrong.
Sorry.
If ever there was any doubt that this show is not scripted. We don't script, you know why? I like to be just as surprised as you at what comes out of my mouth next. All right, so now that that's done, I just want to give this a mix through, and we're going to take a reading. Many people say you should take your reading before you add your yeast. I would disagree. I don't think the yeast changes anything, first off, but I did add water with the yeast, which would change something. So in this case, I'm going to do it afterwards. You don't want to do it like tomorrow afterwards. You want to do it like seconds afterwards. If you wait too long, well, yeah, then it's useless. You got alcohol already. Sorry for getting loud, but you know, it's a thing. Sucking up orange peels.
Hey.
I said orange!
Yay!
Train your brain. Okay, so my expectation on gravity for this is somewhere on specific gravity. I have to say that because somebody asked what gravity was, and they were right. We've been saying gravity, should be saying specific gravity. Should be about 1.105 because we use 3 pounds of honey in a gallon. So let's see where we are. Wow, 1.104. That's about as close.
So we got an OG section right there.
She made new note things for me that I haven't figured out yet.
Confusing him because, again, he's a creature of habit.
I just write things down. And then I look at the video if I need to know.
So what's the next thing on my list there that
pH.
we may have forgotten? So
now, we don't always check pH, but in this case, we're going to, mostly for going through the motions of it. It should be within a tolerable range for the yeast, which, if you look online, you're going to find a million opinions on this. I have found that anything from like 4 to 5.5 seems to be fine. Some yeasts actually like a little bit more acidic, but that range is usually pretty appropriate for most yeasts most of the time. Now, this is my pH meter. There are many like it, but this one is mine. They all operate slightly differently, okay? This one is pretty simple. It has a switch on the top and it has an adjustment on the back. Some of them have a separate calibration button, that kind of thing. And we're just gonna sanitize that before I stick it in there. And some people have asked about calibrating these things. We're gonna be doing a video on doing that. It's not something I do very often. I just need an approximate. If it's off by a 0.1 or something like that, I'm not that worried about it, you know? But if you want to be very worried about it, you can totally do that. It's actually not difficult, but I just have to do a video on it and I'll show you. So we are looking for over 4 and below 6. How's that for a nice range? Right now it's saying 5. Now, honey is a little bit acidic, which is helpful for fermentation because when you mix that with water, now you have basically the perfect situation, but it does need the nutrients. And that's why honey ferments so well when it has nutrients. I'm seeing 5.1.
Beautiful.
I'm good. So just rinse that off and we'll put it away.
Now, by putting it away, there's a cap and everything. We actually don't want to do that right now. We're going to want to let this air dry thoroughly.
See, now you're saying that, but I saw someone online that said you want to put it away wet.
Really?
Yeah. It sounded weird to me too. I'm not gonna. I don't like that idea. We're gonna let it dry. We've always let it dry. It's always worked out fine. We're gonna keep doing it unless somebody tells me that I'm totally wrong. But I did see that on somebody that was doing a calibration. They said, "Oh no, it should be wet," but it came dry when I bought it. It was dry. So
Okay.
I don't know. I don't trust that. It's just weird. But information, you know, we just like to disseminate information.
Okay, so some things that you may be noticing about this is, wow, look at that headspace. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Headspace isn't that critical of a thing to be concerned about at this stage of fermentation.
Yeah, during primary fermentation, it doesn't matter.
Remember that thing I talked about oxygen being good now and being bad later? That's where we're going at here. We want to have room because if our yeasty beasties get super happy, they're going to create lots of foam and it may go all the way up and out and over. So having that additional headspace may actually help us in not having an eruption.
That's why I like using the 1.4 gallon fermenter to start fermentations, and then we use a 1 gallon. So it's kind of like a step down kind of thing. So that way, when you rack, you always lose a little bit. We won't lose as much. We'll still lose the same amount, but we'll still have roughly a gallon when we put it into the next container. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I know. Right now, we're just going to sit, but we're going to let this sit on a edged cookie sheet just in case that aforementioned happiness occurs so that if it does pour out, it'll pour out into the cookie sheet rather than all over our kitchen.
By the way, at this point, if you just let this ferment out, you would probably have a very fine, dry, orangey mead, which is probably good, but you want to keep watching because the next steps are going to make it so much better.
More.
And we'll see you in about 2 seconds after this is done fermenting. So it's been about 2 weeks, and the airlock was starting to slow down a lot. Actually, it stopped. So it's time to do its first check. And for that, we also do an olfactory and optical inspection.
Smells like a young fermentation.
It really does.
With a nice
little bit of
touch
orange kick there, yeah. But there's nothing untoward. There's nothing that looks wrong. Let me show you. So as you can see from looking inside, there's like some bubbles here and there. You can see the orange peel. Yeah, that's orange peel. Zest, actually. It's orange zest. That's what that is. Floating around in there. And then as we come down to the side, got some sediment layer in the bottom, a pretty decent amount.
And there's a little bit of sediment that is collected in the grooves that are in the interior of the vessel. It's completely normal as well.
And then we just have like almost no bubble activity coming up the sides. So yeah, it's time for its first check. We make a big deal about when to do the first check because we get people do a lot of very unusual ideas about when something should be done.
I think it's because they're really excited, they're enthusiastic, and they want to get going on their project. But when it comes to homebrew, time is your friend, and you want to just let it do its thing. Don't rush it. It's not going to go well if you do that.
We have people that after like 24 hours and 36 hours are doing their first check, and I'm like, what? It barely even started. This, on the other hand, started. Pretty sure it's done. It is floating, just barely. This is why I usually fill it more.
It's just staying equal. You're spinning and it's like, nope.
0.994. Now, that means it's probably not going to ferment any further. Normally we would do a second check, but we have other things that we're going to add to this one that's going to basically stop any fermentation that could possibly be occurring. So I'm okay with continuing forward. I know normally we do the 2 checks and all that, but like I say, in this case, because we're going to be adding other things and stopping fermentation, probably not really much of an issue. So we're just going to move forward.
All right, so as Brian said off camera as we were getting everything ready, a whole lot of craziness is about to go on. So the first thing we need to do is rack to our favorite pitcher.
Why do we like this pitcher?
We like this pitcher for so many reasons. First of all, the raised lettering. Not only will we know what our volume is in both metric and US fluid ounces, but we will be able to pour it if we need to take a taste, and we can see what's going on. So we're using this pitcher primarily for the lettering because we need to know our volume of fermentation before we continue much further.
So I have our sample that we used for the hydrometer reading. I don't want to just pour it back in here because then I'll upset all the leaves. And you know, if you've watched any of our videos, you've heard this before. But we repeat things in every video because
gently.
You never know when it's going to be somebody's first video. And it makes things stick. You know, if you hear it a million times, things tend to be remembered
We're going to
better.
need this later. Okay.
Yeah.
See, the craziness. So in racking, we put our destination, which in this case will be our pitcher,
In her lap.
lower than our source.
And then we use an auto siphon. If you want to just use the tubing, if you find some way that you can get it started, go for it. I personally feel the auto siphon, it's like 20 bucks. We'll have links to this stuff in the description. It just works, you know? There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. It just works. You do not want to just pour this. That'll oxidize. You do not want to pour this through a coffee filter or anything like that. It's just, no. Just do this. Trust me. There's a reason why every brewer you ever see does it this way. Almost every. It's because it's the safest, most efficient way to keep all the liquid you want and leave behind all the stuff you don't without causing too much disturbance or problems along the way. Once you get it going, it's just sit and wait. So, see you in a minute. So we have, I'm going to call it 128 ounces. It's so close to 128 that it's fine. I'm just going to take notes on the back. 128 ounces of mead. That's important for in a little while. So basically what we have now is just the base mead. Now, of course, we have to rack this into another wide mouth fermenter so that we can add the other things to it to make it a whiskey old fashioned. So I know we just did this, but we're going to rack it again. I needed that measurement. That's important.
But it's going to be a boring video, so we're just going to skip to the chase.
Yep. See you in a minute.
Insanity has ensued.
Already, there's math. We have to figure things out. But first is our first flavor addition. Now, if you've ever had a whiskey old fashioned, you know that it has a little swath of orange peel, which we got covered. The orange is in there, trust me. And it has maraschino cherries. Now, I love maraschino cherries. They're possibly the most horrific food ever made. I mean, look at the color. That's just not natural.
They took a perfect little fruit and they just annihilate it.
I have to read you the ingredients in this just because it turns my stomach a little bit to know that I'm doing this. But hey, you know, in the efforts of science, we do what we got to do. Cherries, water, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, malic acid, citric acid, natural and artificial flavor, so you know there's beaver parts, potassium sorbate, and sodium benzoate as preservatives, red 40 and sulfur dioxide as a preservative. So this is chock full of preservatives. Now, in a typical cocktail, you get like maybe 1 or 2 cherries. When I make mine, I do like 4 or 5. For this one, I'm doing a whole jar.
So, because they don't expect you to do what we're going to do with this, they give you the
weight.
measurement in weight rather than in volume.
I don't want to wait.
But we
I
need
want volume.
volume.
So I would have been wrong. I was going to guess off camera. It's actually like 14 ounces. Okay. There's a reason why I needed to know that. Be back in a sec. Okay, so the math that has to happen here, we're going to be adding some stuff to this, okay? First is our cherries. So can we just tilt this a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm just going to dump them all right in. And I know it may seem like a lot, but, you know, I think it's all good. There we go. It's going to color it a lot. It's going to be that neon crazy red. And this is the good stuff right here. Every drop counts. Got to get all that in there. Come on.
Aren't you using that to measure your next ingredient?
I am.
Well, it'll come out then.
But it's on the outside. See, it's dripping.
Oh, no.
All right, now I got to go wash my hands. Now comes a little bit of math. First, we know that our mead is 14.85% ABV. How do we know that? Because we took the original gravity of 1.104 and subtracted the final gravity of 0.994, got a number, multiplied that by 135, and that came out to 14.85%. Normally I would round that off and say it's like 14, 14 and a half, whatever, you know? But today I actually want that to be a little bit more precise because of what we're doing. So I know I have 128 ounces of the mead at 14.85%, right? And then I know I have 14 ounces of the cherries at 0%. Are you with me? So now, if I want to boost this, I want to fortify this to like 18% to overpower that 71B, make sure that the beast will not ferment anymore, got to add some spirits. And for that, got Wild Turkey 101. Why did I choose Wild Turkey 101?
Because we like it.
Because we like it and because it's relatively high proof. It's 101, so that means it's 50.5% alcohol. So I did some math, I saved you all the bother of watching me go through all the numbers, and I came out to 20 ounces of the Wild Turkey 101. Now, I'm going to go through the math with you in just a second, but let me get the 20 ounces in here first. I also used it because it's cheap, relatively, for the proof. I mean, I could have gotten, you know, seriously high ABV stuff, but then I would have been spending a fortune to make this. Instead, I'm going to use like half this bottle, if that. Actually, not even half this bottle. So plenty for me later. Okay, so that's 16 ounces.
You just tipped.
Yep.
Oh.
That's right, you heard me. Alcohol abuse.
Yeah, these Pyrex don't have
They
the
don't
same
always
spout that
pour.
our favorite pitcher has.
Yeah. Okay. So I need 4 more ounces, plus like a splash, because, you know, some spilled. I know somebody's going to lose their mind over oxidation, and you know what? Sometimes it can't be avoided. I'd rather oxidize it ever so slightly or risk that than spill it all over the place. So, you know, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. All right, so yeah, I didn't even use half the bottle. Yay. Anyway, so here is the math part of the show. The way I calculate fortification is really, really simple. I think of it in parts, in this case, ounces. So I have 128 parts at 14.85%, 14 parts at 0%, and 20 parts at 50.5%. When you add all that up, and then divide it by the total number of parts, which is 162, I get 18.05% ABV. Now, that's important because we're going to have to sweeten this probably, maybe. I don't know, there's some cherry juice in there that might actually make that interesting.
All the corn products in there.
Oh yeah, it's going to be really good. But we probably want a little more honey character. So it's going to get diluted slightly. But I'm okay with that because the tolerance for 71B realistically is like 15%. So it'll still be at like 17%. But more on that later. We'll talk about that more. So what we need to do now is
give it a stir.
Stir it.
And then give it a tasty taste.
Wow, everything's a something-y something.
Okay, we need a glass. What glass do you want to taste this in?
Glencairn.
Glencairn. I can't speak today. Derp-a-derp.
We have not been drinking it.
All right, so I have fetched yon Glencairn, and we are ready for our tasting if we are well stirred. Another thing that we need to take into consideration are those cherries. So those cherries are going to release some of their flavors, and they're also going to absorb some of the alcohol, kind of like a cast inside your beverage rather than the outside of your beverage.
That's one way to look at it. That is Interesting. I don't know what to make of it yet. I have a feeling it's going to taste pretty dry, though there's quite a bit of sugars in this. Let's just see. There's 36 servings. Total sugar's 2 grams, so there's 72 grams of sugars in this whole jar.
So
it's not a lot.
We got a couple of things going against us right now, and that's why Brian said it's interesting. One, yes, this is young, so we get some of the young aroma, which is interesting. I'm not going to say it's bad, it's just kind of odd.
We say footy, and this is kind of footy, but I'm getting a little bit of a grapefruit smell from it, which immediately tells me this is young and not great for my tastes.
But beyond that, we have a whole jar, liquid and all, of maraschino cherries in here. Now, have you ever stuck your nose into a jar of maraschino cherries?
It smells awesome.
It's kind of like cough syrup-y.
It is not.
It is too.
It's the most awesome thing ever. What are you talking about?
Anyway.
Oh, that's just awesome.
That plus young mead equals...
I like weird things.
Interesting.
Go ahead and taste it. There's whiskey in there too, don't forget.
I'm not really getting the whiskey so much on the aroma. I'm getting youth and maraschino cherry.
It's about 1/8 whiskey at this point. Roughly 1/8. And it's less than that of maraschino cherry. Oh my God, that tastes like an old fashioned. It's not sweet enough. But wow, that is the flavors of an old fashioned. She doesn't like it.
I don't think it needs to be sweetened that much, though.
Oh, it needs some, though.
It needs some.
An old-fashioned is a relatively sweet whiskey drink.
Right, but I feel like on the back, I'm getting the sweetness from the cherries.
I get the cherry flavors, but I'm not getting a lot of sweetness. Just for the sake of everything and stuff.
Let's take a reading.
Let's take a reading. Find out where we're at. But the flavors of the old-fashioned are there. Even the little bit of the whiskey burn comes through. Not a lot, just a little bit. The oaking of the bourbon is coming through quite nicely, actually. I'm tasting that.
For me, I want to sweeten it just to get more of the honey notes coming forward. Is it floating?
I don't think it's even floating. Oh, yeah, it is. It's floating.
Okay.
Yeah, it is at 0.994. So we sweetened it, but then the alcohol in the bourbon took it down some. So this is just like a totally meaningless reading, technically.
It's just for fun.
And I have to try to pour this back in. So can we just tip this a little bit?
S and G's, right? That's the term.
S's and G's. See? I'm trying to pour carefully so as to not oxidize. However, the next thing we're going to do, we are going to add some honey. I don't get any honey character from this. So because this is a mead, I think it needs some honey.
Do you recall what your reading was?
It was 0.994.
Can you note that? So that way we can take a reading when we add the honey to know.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, once we add the honey, we can find out about how much we added.
Yep.
Easy enough. Okay, time for honey.
So it's right there.
Oh.
We are using our Kirkland Wildflower honey because it's a nice neutral honey and it's one of the...
I think it's what we use to make it.
Less expensive honeys that we can get at this point in time.
Readily available too. Most people can get this. How much am I going to add? Not a tremendous amount. We're going to add a little bit at a time and taste. And that's why we're not saying I'm adding a pound or I'm adding half a pound, because we don't know exactly how much it's going to take to be good. I'm not putting the lid back on because I always do that and I make a mess. This
is a finishing. So this is very much, you're going to channel your inner, what do they call them? The blenders or for like in spirits and whiskey, it's the master blender, right? Isn't that the term?
I don't know.
Anyway, there's a terminology.
Master distiller, I think.
But it's the person that tastes and puts all the nuances together.
Distiller.
That's the master distiller. Okay. That's what we're channeling.
Sure. Now, something else to remember too is that those cherries are going to give off more flavor over time. So we may end up with more cherry flavor, though there's only 72 grams of sugar in that whole jar. So it's not going to do much.
But Brian and I both love cherries, so it's not going to be an issue for us at all.
Yeah. I'm glad the orange took a backstage. It's there, like the citrus flavor is there, but it's not coming forward too much. That's good. I didn't want it to overpower.
Yeah, we don't have the fermented orange flavor that I don't like. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that our brew now is as homogeneous as possible. We want to make sure that that honey is well incorporated throughout the liquid, but because we have those cherries in it, sometimes the honey will kind of gloop around the cherries. So you want to do a visual inspection by pushing the cherries towards the glass so you can see if it has
I think we're good.
honey coating.
I think we're good. I also think it's going to need more than that because I put in not much. Not much honey, really. Still no honey on the smell. That may come back in time.
I'm getting a little bit more sweetness, but I think it's not enough honey. It's just
There's a touch of sweetness now.
Yeah.
Probably double to triple what I put in the first time is what we're going to end up needing. But I'm going to put in about the same amount again. Like 3.5 glugs plus what falls off the side as I do this.
Tell the cat to get down.
Knox, down. Okay, now I got to mix it again. It's a wash, rinse, and repeat kind of thing. But we get asked a lot, like, well, how much did you put in? Well, we put in enough to bring it to that gravity. Let me explain why. This is Knox. He's very curious about what we're doing, and he really shouldn't be up there, and he knows it. Come on, down.
Come on, buddy. Get down.
The reason is, you made a 1 gallon batch, but did you get a gallon? Did you get 128 ounces? Did you get 130 ounces? Did you get 120 ounces? How much loss did you have? If we told you add 1 pound of honey to that, if you had 120 ounces, it's going to taste different than if you have 130. What if you only got like 90 ounces out of it? Adding a pound is changing it drastically. Whereas if I say sweeten it to 1.012, not that that's what this is going to be, but it probably will, then you can sweeten that using any volume that you have, 5 gallons, 3 gallons, 100 gallons, it doesn't matter. You can still match it to that 1.012. Does that make more sense? Please explain in the comments below if that didn't come through clear enough. Now we're going to have a difference in opinion on this one too, because I would probably prefer this to be sweeter than Derica would.
Yeah.
Then again, I'm the one that drinks old fashions.
Yep.
Not saying that my opinion counts more, but
It's just a difference.
it's just a difference in preference.
Well, I'm getting some honey on the aroma now.
Very little. I think it has a really interesting color. Looks like pink grapefruit juice. Well, it does.
I like it.
Needs to be sweeter.
See? And that's where the difference of opinion that he predicted is coming in.
Well, here's the thing. I won't drink it as it is.
I'm not...
Oh, okay. Oh, because this comes up a lot, and not just with us, with people saying, oh, that's too sweet. Okay, well, if it's too sweet for you, then don't sweeten it that much. But I know what has happened in our house is when we do this and I say, it's close, but it's not quite there, I'll never drink it because I'll remember that and not do it.
Now, there are some brews that we have brewed specifically for me, and so when we know that this is basically a Derica beverage, then we're going to sweeten it to my taste and let Brian deal with it being slightly drier than
Because
his
I probably
preference.
wouldn't drink it anyway.
But in this case, we know this is a Brian beverage, so there's no point to stop sweetening it until he's happy with it.
I had to do it. It was getting... I'll wash my hands on it. So yeah, it's one of those things, like, if she was going to like this too and probably drink it, we might leave it a little drier and I could always just sweeten it by the glass. And that's not a problem. I know a lot of people that'll do that. If they have different tastes in the same house, they'll keep something dry and then, the people that want it sweet can sweeten it. No big deal. There seems to be a lot of stigma attached to back sweetening, and I don't know where it's coming from. Getting a lot of people saying, I don't want to back sweeten, that ruins it. Well, what? Wait, how? They'd rather try to overpower, and, I get the idea of trying to do it the natural way. But it's actually very natural to just let fermentation stop, too. So either one is more natural. And pasteurization, I mean, Louis Pasteur invented it, but it doesn't mean it wasn't done for hundreds and thousands of years before then. People just didn't know that's what it was called.
There's also another point to the back sweetening to your preference thing is that we know if it's too dry for Brian, he won't drink it. But if it's slightly too sweet for me, I still will.
Drink it. And I am kind of tempering it back. I would like this to be very sweet, to be honest with you, but I'm not going as sweet as I might think because I know those cherries are going to give up some flavors, like I said a couple times already. So that's kind of keeping that in mind to not go overboard. Now I'm getting much more honey. Okay. I think we have enough sweetness now, but it needs some other things too. It needs some wine tannin. This needs some more tannic quality.
Okay.
because the oak of the bourbon is reduced so much due to dilution that it kind of got lost. I tasted it in the very beginning, and now I'm really having trouble finding it at all.
Should we add more whiskey?
No, I don't really want to add more whiskey to it.
Okay.
I think we're good on the whiskey. Let's take a reading, and then we'll start. There's other additions I want to do, but let me take a reading first. Oh, yeah. Got to put the hydrometer in. It's easier if you put the hydrometer in first. That way you don't splash all over. I actually think this needs a little more acid, too. It just could use a little brightness to it.
Yeah.
Wow, she's not disagreeing with me. I'm going to guess at about 1.012 to 1.015 or so. And I was a little bit off. 1.018. So it's sweet, but not overly. The reason for the careful pour is to avoid oxidation, which I know sounds kind of ironic since we have this open vat sitting right in front of us. But agitation causes oxidation a lot faster than just sitting there. Don't get me wrong. Let this sit for days like this. Yeah, you're going to oxidize. Okay.
To the shelf.
Yes, we need
want wine
acid
tannin?
blend and wine tannin. Okay. Acid blend. If you wanted to, you could use lemon juice, orange juice, things like that. I find this is a little more neutral. It's a combination of malic, tartaric, and ascorbic, I think, or citric acid. Does it say? Nope, doesn't say. But it's 3 or 4 different kinds of acids. Makes for a very neutral flavor balance. Now, I know, oh, here he is. 50% malic acid, 40% citric, and 10% tartaric acid. Okay, so 1 teaspoon per gallon increases acidity by 0.1%. I honestly don't really know what that means. Like, I think in terms of pH, so that doesn't change the pH because it's a logarithmic scale. It gets complicated. So again, it's per taste. So 1 teaspoon. I think I'm going to go with the full teaspoon for this because I know we've done more than that in others. So this time, I'm just going to add that teaspoon right to it. What acid does is it brightens flavors, okay? Acids and sweetening both can alter flavors. Salt is a similar thing too. Salt will brighten flavors as well. But the flavors are already good. I just want to kind of brighten them up a little bit, give it a little bite, kind of. So thus a little bit of acid will help with that. We don't want a lot. And the reason I did that first is because the wine tannin, once that goes in, it gets kind of weird. I don't want to taste it after I do that. So that's just going to be a rough guess. And put some in and see how it goes.
So we're tasting...
We're going to taste it with the acid. I think it's better. I don't really want to go much further. I know I could, but I also am thinking of those cherries, still giving up a little bit more. It just brightened it just a notch. Just turned it up from 10 to 11. That's all. Now, wine tannin. This is another one. They say 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon per gallon. Now, I know that normally an old-fashioned is made with bourbon, which is oaked, strong oaking flavor. So that is a 1/2 teaspoon. Yeah, I'm going to go with the 1/2. They say 1/4 to 1/2. I'm going with the 1/2. And it's a generous 1/2 at that. So in that goes. And now we want to mix that around because it clumps and gets just stupid. That will take a little bit of time to permeate and really extract. What it basically is, it's oak extract. It's the same thing as if you put it into a barrel for a while. So just an easier way to go.
So we're not oaking this.
Right, I technically just did.
Right. So we added a 1/2 teaspoon of wine tannin.
Mm-hmm. And a 1/2 teaspoon of acid blend. Or no, it was a full teaspoon of acid blend. My mistake. The next thing we got to do is we're going to put a lid and an airlock back on this because we're done with the hard coat. And what we want to do now is let this sit for a while. We want to make sure that it doesn't kick back up in fermentation because we did add honey to it, okay? We added probably 1/2 pound of honey, I would say. Yeah, probably 1/2 pound, maybe just a touch over. So there's a potential that there's wild yeast in that honey that could start and the yeast is in here still. Maybe you could do something, you never know.
Now some of you might be going, oh my gosh, guys, your airlock is going crazy already.
That's degassing.
That's degassing. And you'll see that there is a thin layer of foam at the top and little tiny bubbles coming out everywhere.
I can prove to you that it's degassing. And also, this is a good idea. It's going to purge out any oxygen that could be in here. We didn't degas this at all. So there's plenty of CO2 in there. that's going to come out, which that's going to make the airlock go too. So I'm probably going to keep degassing this every once in a while. I'll just give it a swirl like that with the lid on. That way I'm not introducing oxygen, I'm pushing the oxygen out with the CO2. So this will sit on the shelf for, what, a week, maybe 2? Oh, it's on fruit. 2 weeks, most likely. Anyway, this is going to go sit on the shelf, and I'm going to think about all the things that we can do with those cherries now, and we'll see you in about 2 seconds. It's been a couple weeks, so we decided we're going to give this a proper tasting, and we're going to set it up like an old-fashioned.
Now, our intent for this beverage was always to have it be kind of, pardon my fingers.
It's fine.
I'm trying to be delicate here. I am not a delicate person.
Just put it in the glass. Doesn't matter.
We always intended on this to be fancy. This is our fancy brew. And so that's why...
We don't do fancy very often.
We don't do fancy. And so that's why we're like, hey, let's just do this thing, make it a presentation, maybe something you'd want to share with friends at a special event, perhaps.
To express the orange peel. And cherry.
There you go. All right, let me get all this stuff.
She gets all fancy. Now, the other thing you can do with the orange peel is you kind of wipe the rim. Since yours is all meatified, I'll wipe your rim for you.
You wipe my
Oh,
rim.
this is that. Oh man, you know.
So now that we're fancy, we're gonna taste this.
Well, we have clarity to talk about. It in the bottle, you can see it here. We just put a little in the bottle to make it fancy to pour. It is incredibly clear, like crystal clear.
Beautiful color. This beautiful pinky, peachy.
Like a pinky peach, yeah. I like it. On the smell, now we chilled it. It's not in the proper glass, but it is like an old-fashioned.
Right, right.
It smells a lot like an old-fashioned.
It does. You get, even before we did the additions, we cheated and we smelled it pure, unadulterated. And it smells like an old-fashioned, like Brian just said. You get the cherry, you get the orange, you get the honey, yep. And you get that little splash of whiskey.
Yep. This is the intended way that I wanted this to be prepared, by the way. We talked about this ad infinitum. I thought, oh, well, it'd be cool to be able to just pour it over ice and have an old-fashioned. Well, yeah, but you know what? Garnish is a thing. It's kind of important.
Those of you who really get into cocktail presentation and the whole experience of having something artfully presented in a glass, and actually, just like with food, it enhances the experience. The common phrase is that you eat with your eyes. Well, drinking is essentially eating liquid. So you're going to drink with your eyes as well.
Drink with your face.
Drink with your face. All of your face.
Honestly, it's not that far off.
No, it's really lovely, and
you definitely taste that it's a mead and not just drinking straight whiskey.
Right, which makes me endlessly happy, because I had severe concerns when we started putting all that whiskey in there. They're like, we're just going to annihilate this and it's just going to be an old-fashioned. We're not going to get any of the mead notes. This has retained its meadness.
Yeah, it's meaty.
It's meaty.
But it is truly a whiskey old-fashioned mead. It really is. That's exactly what we set out to do. And, you know, for anybody that says, oh, that's not an old-fashioned, no kidding. Of course it's not. And if you are a purist and are going to be offended if it doesn't taste exactly like bourbon, well, look away, because it's not gonna.
Yeah.
It's reminiscent of it, is what it is. It's a mead that's meant to remind you of an old-fashioned.
And with all of these cocktails that we are creating, we're not actually creating the cocktail. We're taking the cocktail as our inspiration.
Yeah.
This is our...
Yeah, it's an old-fashioned inspired mead.
Right. And so we use those flavor profiles, those emotions, those experiences that you get from that cocktail. We use that as our inspiration to create something new that is an homage to the cocktail.
Anyway, flavors that I'm getting from this, definitely get a little bit of the bourbon smokiness, and the vanillins actually come through stronger than I thought they would. Obviously, a little bit of citrus, but it's not the bitter citrus.
Nope.
It's kind of just got a little floral aromatic thing going on. The
mandarins
cherries
are out of here. No more mandarins.
No more mandarin peels. Mandarin juice is fine. Mandarin peels are bad. The Maraschino Cherry. I like more Maraschino Cherry in my old fashions than some people do. Like, I don't just put a couple of cherries in. I pour some of the juice in too. That's just a personal thing. Not everybody does that. This has a little bit more of the the maraschino cherry
Yeah.
flavor.
Yeah.
Some people might be offended by that. If that bothers you, you can just cut back the amount of maraschino cherry that you put in it in conditioning. But I think it actually adds really nicely to it.
I love the cherry and orange play off of each other because it kind of enhances those two flavor profiles with the sweet fruit juiciness that your brain triggers and goes, oh, the sweet. And then that in addition with the honey makes this a really lovely sweetness level without
You can
it
drink
being...
way too much of this.
Yes.
Like
This-
very easily. This is
a danger brew.
This is mid-teens for ABV, 15, 16%,
Yeah.
something like that.
Another thing Brian hinted on with the, well, he didn't hint, he just told you, with the whiskey addition is that it really does bring the vanillins into play here. And that was one of the things I was contemplating when we were making this. It's like, oh, should we oak it? Well, we didn't have to because we added an oaked spirit to it. And I think that really...
I don't think oaking would hurt it, though.
No,
It
but
would add an extra depth, maybe.
what I wanted from oaking is in here.
Is in here. Yeah, that's why we didn't go crazy. I remembered when we were doing the initial like flavor tests, it was coming through enough. The barrel oak was coming through that I was like, I don't know that we need to. Could you if you wanted to? Oh, absolutely. You could just add another level of depth to this. There's a lot, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of ways you can go. If you want something that tastes like what we made, which is a really nice, light, it's not heavy at all. It's not hard to drink. It tastes of honey. I taste honey. Okay, this is a mead. Without a doubt, I would know it was mead.
I'm also getting the mouthfeel that I
Yeah,
expect
it's a little thick.
from this combination of things. It feels like it's a mead that has maraschino cherry juice and whiskey in it. It has that lovely mouth coating sensation going on.
It's got a very short finish, which I'm a little surprised of.
Yeah, it
Just kind of
short.
in one and done. It's just gone.
And I wonder if it's
'cause it's
because
cold.
it's on ice.
Yep, it's because it's cold. Most of your colder beverages, they're just in and out. They're gone. I'm not offended by it because it kind of makes you want to drink more. It makes you want to have another taste. The flavor profile, though, is just wonderful all around. Very, very balanced. It's sweet, but not overpoweringly sweet. It's got enough acids there from both the whiskey, the bite, and from the citrus to really give you something to appreciate. It feels very bright and light in your mouth.
So besides presentation of adding the fresh maraschino cherry and the orange zest
Swath.
to this swath. Thank you, swath.
Zest is the little teeny tiny
Yep,
things.
yep.
This is a
It's
swath
swath.
or peel.
I nearly swathed my thumb in that, but hey, I sacrificed for my art. Is that I had intended when we were creating this, like, oh, putting the whole cherries in there, it's awesome because then they could be in the bottle. And then I was like, wait a minute.
How are we going to get them out?
A cherry in a bottle is
Yeah.
not a good idea. And beyond that physical problematic situation, those cherries were just sitting in the lease. And so how much lease do they have in them now?
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations
I don't
there.
really know how much I want to eat those now.
By the way, we have not actually bottled it yet. It's still sitting in the fermenter. It will sit there for a while. The cherries are all in the bottom.
Yeah.
There's no harm. We'll probably rack it in the next week and then let it sit for a while before we bottle.
If we didn't have a gajillion things that we needed to do, it would be okay for us to bottle it now because it is crystal clear. And that's basically the primary
you
reason.
Rack it first to let it all settle out again.
Because we want to have a clean as possible bottle
Yeah, you want
for our final
after
product.
pouring it for the bottle to look like that.
Yeah. So,
It's probably not going to. And here's the thing. No matter how squeaky clean it is going into the bottle, a little's always going to fall out over time. That's just the way things go.
right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's dead yeast down there. It could be
Proteins reformulating.
any manner of
different
proteins
compounds.
that are in
Yeah,
your
there's
brew.
all sorts
And that's
of
just
things.
how it works. And if you buy commercial wines, meads, and stuff, you'll find that they have sediment in the bottom of theirs as well, because it's a natural process. All right. I think I got all my flavor things that I wanted to talk about in there. Beautiful color, beautiful aroma, beautiful flavor, and beautiful texture.
So let's talk about repeatability. Scale of 1 to 10, how repeatable is this for other people to do?
I would say it was a fairly straight.
I'm going to say 8 to 9. It's
Yeah,
in there. It's
yeah.
fairly straightforward. A lot of it comes down to taste and experience on getting those flavors to balance, like how much do you want to add, how little do you want to add. Then there's the calculations. If you don't do it exactly like we do and use the exact same stuff as we do, you may run into some issues. Like we used a 50.5% ABV whiskey to fortify. If you don't use that, if you use something that's lower, you're going to need more whiskey, which is going to alter the flavor profile, which might alter the amount of sweetness you need to add.
And
So
if you use something higher,
then you need less, or you'll have a higher ABV and harsher. And so things like that come into play. You know what? I'm convincing myself 7 to 8. This is not the simplest thing. If you don't do it exactly the way we did, your product can be very different, and you might even run into re-fermentation.
The complexity really isn't in the ingredients and how it was processed. Is that there's so many different steps. So each step, each addition, each nuance could,
I'd say 7,
possibly cause some problem.
I mean, could most people who have ever made a brew or two before do this? Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
You just have to be aware of what you're doing, follow the directions, follow the recipe, and you'll be fine. So I'm going to say 7. I can't go much higher.
Right. And to be honest, the only reason why we're knocking it down to a 7 is because we've learned some truths in our history of being YouTube creators, is that people don't really pay attention. And that's just a human condition for everybody.
I mean, I watch YouTube videos while I'm playing on my cell phone.
Right.
So I understand
if you aren't invested in this video of the making and figuring out all the different steps, if you miss one little thing,
it could change it.
Then it could change it. And sometimes when that happens to people, they blame us. And
it's rare, but
it's a thing.
Happen.
It's a thing. So,
anyway, that's our remaking. What's the word?
Repeatability.
Repeatability. Okay. On to enjoyability. Now
enjoyability. Man.
This is where we go scale of 1 through 10, with 11 being reserved for those just super amazing things. I like to think of it like 1 through 4, pretty much not something I'd want to drink. 5 through 7 to 8 is pretty good. You know, like that's decent stuff. I would drink that. And then anything above a 7 or an 8 is really good. That's how I like to think of it, just to make life easy. I believe I have a score. I think you do too. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3,
10.
9.
I love this drink.
And
I think I'm supposed to let you go first, but I'm so excited
Ladies
about this.
first.
I'm so excited about this because it was a great concept mentally, and then we were trying to figure it out. I'm like, oh, but is that going to cause a problem? Oh, is that going to be a problem? Oh. And so I was hesitant through the process. I had concerns. I had legitimate concerns. All of my concerns have been addressed, and it's beautiful. My biggest concern is that it wasn't going to taste like a mead. It absolutely tastes like a mead. I can get those honey notes without problem. And my second was that being a mead, having those honey notes, is that going to take away from the cocktail experience? No, this is an old fashioned with just some honey.
Yeah, it's kind of an old fashioned with honey added, sort of.
Excuse me. It's beautiful. It tastes great. It smells great. It feels great. It's great.
Okay, I didn't go 10 because what we tasted here is not what's in the bottle.
Fair enough.
That is my biggest. It's not an issue. It's just that's the truth of it. If I was to do this, now I have to go and find maraschino cherries. I have to get a swath of orange. There's things you have to do, which to most people is probably not even an issue, but it does keep it from being absolutely perfect, in my opinion. Also, I like the fruitiness of it. I'd like a little bit more of the barrel char. I think oaking this would have taken it a notch above. I don't know that it's necessary, and I'm afraid that it might throw other things out of balance.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't do it. But it's that little nagging feeling in the back of my head that makes me say, I can't give this a 10. But a 9 and a 10? Come on, this is awesome. I mean, this is just really, really good.
Now, we did cheat, and we did taste this without its presentation, and our numbers were still pretty high then. I think we were 8s or something
8s
like
and
that.
9s, something like that. Yeah.
So, but then we were like, wait, that wasn't our intent. That wasn't what we wanted. This is what we wanted.
With this.
So
it's a different experience.
It is.
It's a whole different thing. If you just drink this out of the bottle like we did, no ice, no garnish, it's a whole different experience.
But I think taking this to a party, doing the swath and presenting that to your friends, be it a birthday,
it's even a nice holiday thing.
Yeah, because of the red.
Yeah.
And it's very festive. I think you would really impress people and make them really appreciate your efforts into creating a unique and complex homebrew.
So make this.
Yeah.
If you like whiskey and bourbon especially, go ahead and make this. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.